I've always thought this was just a typo. Can Poland into space just makes no sense to me. Just makes no sense to me. But yeah, this is by Krot. Can Poland into space?
Going to space is surprisingly more dependent on geography than you may first expect. The best way to go to space is by taking advantage of Earth's rotational speed, so you can save up some fuel. That means the best place to launch is close to the equator, where Earth's rotational speed is at its maximum. Since our planet rotates west to east, it's best to launch rockets into the east. And since things can go wrong during a launch and the rocket may fall out of the sky, or because
Well, that's what's funny, because it's called Blue Origin, right? It's called Blue Origin, the Amazon rocket company. Didn't they just have their entire rocket explode on their base? I think that actually just happened. But yeah, it's yeah, their rocket just boom.
may have stages to drop, it would be ideal to have a lot of empty space east of where you're launching from. The geography of going to space begins on Earth, and the geopolitics of space will revolve around who controls the ability to launch into space. The Americans launch from Florida. It is close to the equator, and if something is dropped or goes wrong, it goes straight into the Atlantic. America has even more options available. For future space programs, Hawaii, or should they become states, Guam and Puerto Rico, would be even better launching sites than Florida. The United States is in the unique position of having multiple perfect places from which they could launch into space completely undisturbed. Adding to that is a society that has the resources to go to space. The Americans will therefore continue to be this planet's major player in space, and will probably dominate the space sector for decades to come. The Europeans are largely screwed in the geography of space. Not only are they distant from the equator, but anything they launch and would fail or drop would come down over Russia. Now, some of you may not care much about the well-being of Russia, but it also means that Russia could shoot down anything launched from Europe. Therefore, European rockets are launched from the French overseas territory of French Guiana in South America. If French Guiana would ever become independent in the future, European ambitions for an independent space program would be kind of screwed. Europe would then have to go.
Europeans plan to go to space? I don't think so.
Ask others to launch their rockets for them, or build a completely new spaceport, for which the Portuguese islands, called the Azores, would be the best alternative location. Europe was late to developing space programs, and for decades, each country pursued its own goals with limited resources. In 1975, the European Space Agency was founded, and by now, Europeans learned that they have a better chance of going to space when they work together. If there is to be a European future in space, Europe will have to continue working together. Europe is largely still catching up to others, especially in launch capabilities, although they are real good in satellites and deep space research. And for the time being, Europe has hitched itself to working with NASA in the hope of learning from the Americans.
Well, it's not just NASA now. Again, Blue Origin, which just had its own hiccup, and X has been launching things into space for SpaceX. It's SpaceX. X is a social media platform. Has been launching things into space for a long time now, a really long time.
When there's talk of a coming space race, it is often framed in the old Cold War terms with the Americans and the Soviets. But that is largely untrue. Russia is on a decline from space. Russia was the pioneer in space. It sent the first satellites to space, the first human beings, and the first space stations. Russia used to sell rocket engines to the West, because the Soviets were the first to figure out rocket propulsion for space travel, mainly through their genius chief rocket engineer, Sergei Korolev. But when Korolev died in 1966, the Soviet space program stagnated and declined from here on, unable to produce such genius and his innovations again. Rocket propulsion may have been a great innovation in the 1950s and 1960s, and while it is still a big deal, it isn't that much of a big deal today anymore. Billionaires can hire engineers to do it. In fact, you can watch Taiwanese nerds build rocket propulsion systems with 3D printers here on YouTube.
Yep, the nerds that do it all themselves, all in-house.
Those may be small in scale, but who knows where those nerds will be in a few years. What will hurt Russian space ambitions the most is isolationism. The Russians ended partnerships with Europe and America, and an American, European, and East Asian ban on selling semiconductors and laser technology to Russia is destined to put its space program on a decline. Because as much as Taiwan right now cannot into space, when Russia tells her she can into China, Taiwan will remind Russia that Russia cannot into semiconductors. Bottom line here is, if you want to be a leader in space today, those who sell semiconductors are more important than those who sell rocket propulsion systems. Meaning, if you want to go to space, good relations to Taiwan and the Netherlands are more important than with Russia. Russia still has one great thing going for them. The Baikonur spaceport is one of the best launch sites in the world. Something the Russians seem to have forgotten, though, is that it is in Kazakhstan, and after recently being proven unable to force their will onto other countries, Russia has realized that its space program is dependent on Kazakh goodwill. Space travel has changed dramatically since the Cold War. It is no longer just a matter of scientific and national prestige. Modern space travel is an intricate network of international cooperation between science institutes, public sector, private corporations, and market interests from multiple countries across the...
Yeah, because it's no longer a corporate... Oh, I was going to say, it's no longer a national thing. Like back in the day, back in the 60s, when it was the entire rage, like who could get to the moon first was like, oh my gosh, we're gonna be the first out there. Like that no longer really means anything. I mean, it's always fascinating because the fact that we can actually have the capability, the manpower, the brains to launch ourselves out into space. I mean, the fact that that's even feasible is just amazing. I mean, I'm no rocket engineer, but yeah, that is absolutely phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal, incredibly amazing. It shows how we've progressed as a species. even though we still have the same problems this day and age as we did thousands of years ago, but we've still progressed as a species, more modernized. But now it's companies. Even companies. Give it a few years, maybe another decade or two, a few more decades, and you might be able to purchase a rocket trip to space for probably a couple $100. Right now, you need about $1 million to book a seat for a joyride. Like Katy Perry? You know, those forgetful women that nobody cared about anymore, who went off to space and called themselves astronauts just because they wanted to be relevant and in the news once again. And again, that was Blue Origins, which just had a rocket blow up. If only they did that with the female launch, would have solved a lot of problems. I jest.
Entire globe. Close to nobody goes to space alone anymore. Going to space today means working together with others. The Russians massively shot themselves in the foot. They will not be one of the main competitors in a future space race. China is one of the co-founders of the Asia-Pacific Space Cooperation Organization, founded in 2005. Unlike the Russians, the Chinese correctly understood the challenges of modern space travel, primarily that walking it alone is undesirable and that cooperation is desirable. The Chinese like to promote their space program as a fundamentally collaborative effort for the benefit of all of Asia, just under Chinese leadership. This is smart. The West may at some point put restrictions on the export of semiconductors and laser technology to China, but can it do the same for the rest? By formulating their space program as international in its mission, China has protected their ambitions in space, but also unintentionally damaged them. China's current priorities are to get a man on the moon and to expand its satellite navigation system Baidu as a competitor to the American GPS. But Iran, who is part of the organization, prioritizes military satellites and rockets that can come back down to Earth over Israel, which annoys China. Pakistan also pursues military goals in its space program, which would offer potential for cooperation with Iran. But Pakistan's rocket program targets Iran's friend India, which makes Iran...
Which also bothers China, even though China... Like, that's the funny thing. China doesn't, is okay with all those obstacles being taken off the map, but also doesn't want to aid people who want to take all the obstacles off the map. But it has to rely on them in order to get it done what it needs to get done. It's funny how they've allied themselves with those that plan on, they're in the kaboom culture, let's say. They're in the kaboom culture.
Unhappy, but China happy. You see the problem? What's the point of having partners when you can't agree with them? The clearly implied Chinese leadership has also increasingly made partners like Thailand uneasy. China made an organization without clearly defining its goals, and for her neighbors, all it did was incentivize them to work harder on their own space programs. What one should also not forget is that China's space program is plagued with many failures, the most recent in 2021. Unable to develop things such as high-end semiconductors that Taiwan has, it has only been since 2019 that China subsidized the creation of private companies in the space industry and shared a few of its state-secret rocket technologies with those. Whether this will improve on the Chinese space program is yet to be seen. To India and Japan, China's Asia-Pacific Space Organization is primarily seen as one thing: a threat, especially to India. From their perspective, this organization almost looks like a belt intended to surround them. Consequently, this Chinese initiative did more good for the Indian space program than it did for the Chinese space program, because India was motivated into gearing up its space program. There may have been some initial problems and some failures, but it is today very clear that India is catching up very fast with its Chinese rival. In fact, India recently became the 4th country to land on the moon, and just a quick look at the news coverage will show you the politics at play here. I can see on ground news that more than 300 sources from around the world reported on this story, and the coverage is pretty evenly distributed across the political spectrum. But if I scroll down, I can compare every single article on the topic with convenient tags showing me context about the source, like how reliable it is and who owns it. This US-based source on the left suggests India is joining an elite club. But beyond the left-right political spectrum, what I really like to see is the difference in how nations report on the same event. For example, this source, based out of New Delhi, emphasizes the fact that India is the first nation to land near the moon's south pole. And other than the South China Morning Post, which is based out of Hong Kong, there are no major Chinese news sources reporting on this development. Sometimes not saying anything says a lot. Ground News has been a reliable companion in my research endeavors for videos like this. It ensures that I stay
doing an ad
updated on a
placement.
myriad of topics, thanks to the work.
I gotta say, I am enjoying this ad placement. He's really placing it well and relevant to what he's actually talking about.
Wide selection of sources. Their mission aligns with much of what I do here, diving deeply into issues, providing context, and promoting informed discussions. It's especially useful right now as the world grapples with the events in Israel and Palestine.
I think he cut out the bottom. The G isn't complete. The O isn't complete. The U isn't complete, and the D isn't complete, which means everything's cut down, cut at the bottom.
You can sign up for a little as $1 per month or subscribe through my link ground.news/crowd to get 30% off unlimited access. By subscribing, you actively support the content we create here. A big thank you to Ground News for supporting my channel. India is also already blessed by something China lacks: the perfect geography for going to space. India's spaceports are all in the south, as close to the equator as possible, and charge into space over the Indian Ocean. India also has something else: an education sector built on initiative and innovation and transparency and creativity, rather than the ideologically mandated drill schools of...
Yeah, and a lot of them get hired on, they're all over the world helping in the space programs. Well, and all other kind of infrastructures that require mathematicians and engineers and, all that kind of stuff.
China. And India can also rely on an innovative private sector and a large pool of highly educated Indian expats, giving India the educational edge. India is about to send a man to space in 2024. Its space program shows enormous promise. Japan also was pushed into greater action by China, but Japan focuses on civilian sectors: navigation, environmental protection, surveillance, and communication. It is astonishing how little we hear in the West of the Japanese space program in our news, because it is very impressive. The Japanese just happen to be very humble about it. In existence since the 1950s, even though they never sent a man into space, Japan was never far behind the United States when it comes to satellite and rocket technology. Japan has a geographically great spaceport in Tanegashima, and Japan has conducted many successful launches. And besides a great geography for space, Japan also owns two other things needed for space: a lot of money and a lot of very big brains. Popular news media likes to sometimes raise the specter of a looming space race between China and the United States, which is really not the case. It is more appropriate to speak of an Asian space race, where the threat of China has pushed India and Japan to work together, and the rest of Asia will be picking sides between those two teams. By the standards of geography, it is ironically none of the countries who we consider to be big in space travel who have the best geography for space travel. It's Brazil, Venezuela, Ghana, Nigeria, Cameroon, Kenya, Somalia, Ethiopia, India, Sri Lanka, Philippines, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, and Australia. These countries have the ideal geographies for getting to space, but they also prove that geography is not everything. Venezuela has the geography for space, but it has neither the money or functioning institutions for space. Venezuelan satellites are built and launched from China. Somalia has far more pressing issues, and so does Sri Lanka. Kenya has the best geography for launching into space in the world, but rather than developing its own space program, they wish to sell launching sites to others. Africans know that throughout their history, whenever non-Africans wanted what Africans had, they came to take it by force. African ambitions are set on taking advantage of their own opportunities before anyone else can, but African states have a lot more challenges to settle on Earth before space is reachable as a frontier. So it is worth keeping in mind that African countries could also be set to lose. Australia, Indonesia, and the Philippines largely neglected their beneficial space geography. The Philippines relied on the Chinese to launch satellites, the Indonesians and Australians on the Americans. But in recent years, with more interest in space, all of them are now more intensely exploring the ideas of their own space programs. If they lease their geography out, build their own programs, or continue to neglect it is yet to be seen. One thing to watch with all of them is with who they choose to work together in going to space. The only countries who have a great geography for space and take full advantage of it are the aforementioned India and... Brazil has an unfortunate nickname among political scientists: the forever next superpower, that for 200 years is just a few years away from being South America's superpower.
It's always going to be the next superpower. It's going to be the next superpower. And every decade is going to be the next
like
superpower.
India, not only has the perfect geography for going to space, but also has a pretty decent space program. What is more impressive is that Brazil managed to develop this space program despite the Americans opposing it. The Americans blockaded the sale of rocket technology to...
India might be suffering from sabotage in recent launches, which are being investigated in an external hand. I remember hearing about one of the launches, and it was just like, I forgot who I was checking out at the time, but it was like suspect. Something was suspect there. Something just seemed shady. But yeah, I mean, who knows? Maybe someone got a hold of Blue Origin and caused that thing to, completely explode. Like Amazon is now going to be down several $1 billion because their warehouse alone, I think, cost like $1 billion. Their rocket cost a couple, like 100 million, over 100 million. And then you have to take all the property damage, because they completely destroyed their own facility. And then they also destroyed the explosion was massive. Debris flew far away and hit some houses and things like that. So there's going to be massive lawsuits towards Amazon and yeah, probably rolling in right now. And they're being hit with massive lawsuits. So yeah, their space program is probably going to take a back seat for a bit.
Brazil since the 1980s, when Brazil managed to make its space program increasingly independent from the United States. In return, Brazil worked increasingly with China on developing her space program. The Americans increasingly began seeing Brazil as one of its main competitors, mainly because Brazil's launch site was geographically better and cheaper. The Americans also worried that if American companies began sending rockets to be launched from Brazil, the Brazilians would steal American technology and sell it. So, Americans were banned from launching rockets in Brazil. But despite these American measures, the Brazilian space program persevered. The American boycott of the Brazilian space program eventually ended in 2019. But before you cheer for the plucky yet successful Brazilian space program, you should know that it also has its own dark history. The launch site was built on quilombolas. The quilombolas are runaway African slaves who fled the Brazilian slave plantations into the isolated regions of northern Brazil, where far away from the plantations and their owners, they built farms and constructed communities. In 1982, the Brazilian military dictatorship bulldozed the quilombola farms of Alcantara and chased away the 300 Afro-Brazilian farmers and fishermen who lived there to build the Brazilian Space Launching Center. This is a really well-hidden historical fact. You will not find it on the Wikipedia page of the Brazilian Space Center, and the only reason I know this is because at university my professor for Latin American history gave it as an example when teaching us about the legacies of slavery in Brazil. And this very down-to-earth social issue lies at the core of what made
The fact that that stuff still happens even to this day. Like, again, a lot of stuff gets buried by those with the ability to do so. China sabotaged Brazil's space program and its satellites. I mean, again, I personally believe like every nation kind of gets involved in trying to sabotage each other, depending on who's the biggest threat at that point in time. Like at this point in time, whoever's getting involved in messing with like India's space launches could be America, could be China, could be Russia, could be anyone. Not wanting India to literally put its foot forward as a world power. The longer they can prevent that, the more powerful the main superpowers will feel, because it's just what it is. It's a schoolyard bullying, schoolyard bullying. Like I'm pretty sure everyone's gone to school, and there are like several groups of bullies, but the bullies don't like each other. They hate each other, but they want to be the most powerful bullies, so they'll get several henchmen. I mean, that's what like. I guess Russia's now the standalone where they're isolated on their own. China's kind of bullied a few other extremist kids to their side, and then the U.S. basically has the ones that can't defend for themselves, but literally can take like, you know, give me your lunch money, and I won't beat you up type of thing.
Limit and inhibit the Brazil space program in the future. In 2019, Bolsonaro agreed to expanding the space center, but that expansion plan would have meant taking the land of up to 1,000 quilombola families and destroying 600 quilombola villages. Northern Brazil is an ideal location for going to space. With the American boycott gone, private companies and governments are lining up to do launches. Brazil could become the South American center for space travel. Northern Brazil has historically been the poorest part of Brazil and still continues to be. The majority of the northern population is Afro-Brazilian, and is also where you will find the quilombolas, so having this infrastructure there would benefit the region. But, obviously, just bulldozing towns into the ground and chasing away their peoples is something that a democratic and free Brazil should not do. So before Brazil can proceed further into space, it will probably have to enter negotiations with locals over recompensation to expand their space center to not repeat the mistakes of the 1980s. At the end of this video, I want to shout out Ravignon. He's a YouTuber who's been featured on this channel before. You might recognize his work in the thumbnail of the Neutrality in Europe of the 2022 video, or collab on how Christianity destroyed the tribal family, and some other slides on this channel, including within this video. Ravignon is working on a long-format Poland.
Okay, yeah, that's actually pretty informative. 2 years old, outdated, because I think it would have been more fascinating to have that kind of come out, him have a new version and talk about all the things that have been happening recently, especially because space travel is so fascinating. The fact that we're capable of such a thing, and the fact that we're still coming up with new technologies. We are going further and beyond. I think that's kind of great. I think that is absolutely great. But yeah, when it comes to like who sabotaged who, I can literally believe it could be anyone, because again, each of the superpowers is all a bully trying to be like getting their allies be like, okay, I won't bully you if you give me your lunch money. Just always give me your lunch money first thing. And then there are those nations where they'll use as like a playgrounds, so which are basically the kids have the two little kids fight each other because the bullies don't want to punch each other out. So they have their little peons that give them their lunch money. It's like, oh, you go fight for me. You go fight for me. Oh my gosh. Yeah, because these things are just, yeah, it's fascinating. It's fascinating because I've never had that fascination. Well, that's not entirely true. I've always had like a fascination with space, mainly because of Star Wars and Star Trek, but I never personally wanted to go out there, but I always found it so interesting. The fact that we're here on this speck of sand in the vastness of the cosmos, how much more life form can there possibly be out there? And if there is, how far away is it? What kind of life form is it? I mean, that's I've always loved thinking that kind of stuff, because when you realize how insignificant you are in the large scheme of things, for some people, it makes them feel like it like breaks their reality, because everyone wants to be like the main character. Everyone has that main character syndrome. But there are those who, when they realize, it's just like, huh, I can literally only do the best of what I can do right now, and then that's it. I'll be forgotten in like 100 years. and no one will remember me. And that there's something freeing about that. For some people, it's probably the wrong kind of freeing, because they're like, oh, nothing matters. I'm going to go and do this, because it serves no purpose, when that's not entirely the truth. I mean, it does matter. But yeah, it is fascinating seeing that we're going out into space, because I would love the opportunity to. I really would. But maybe in a few decades, where the tickets become like $100, I can save up a few months and then get a ticket for myself to just travel up in space and see it. Just see it. I think that would be awesome. I think that would be awesome.
You guys got a video? It was so bad.
And don't forget to like and subscribe.
Wait, wait on that.